everyone, Manny here from Onyx Commodities. Today I wanted to discuss with you a little bit about the Brent Futures complex. And the reason that I've chosen to talk about this particular topic is because the Brent Futures market is very well known, very heavily traded, whereas the link between the futures market and the underlying physical markets is less known about. So hopefully after this short presentation, it will become a little bit clearer. And if you have any comments, please write them below or be welcome to private message me and I'll be happy to reply.
Okay, so this is the diagram that I'm going to be referencing throughout this presentation. So we see the Brent Futures complex as these 6 individual components, and between these 6, that is exactly what links the physical market with the paper market. How does this relationship hold between these 6 individual components? Now, if you have been following us on LinkedIn, I'm sure you would have heard us heavily speak about the idea or the concept of basis risk. So as it stands, as I've said here, there's often some misconception on trading Brent futures and what they do truly represent. So Brent futures are arguably one of the most liquid of oil contracts. There are a lot of speculators, which obviously is great for liquidity for traders. But when we get closer to expiry, in reality, these futures are priced off only 5 fields in the North Sea in Northwest Europe. So these 5 fields are a particular grade of crude, which obviously will not be a representation of all the crude around the world. And these particular 5 fields we say are light and sweet. So this refers to their sulfur content and their density. So now just to put it into context, these 5 fields roughly account for 1 million barrels per day in production, compared to the global production of 100 million barrels a day. So you can see that if only 1% of the world's crude production is being used to price, say, 75% of what is actually traded in the futures market, there can be some price discrepancies when we come into expiry. So here I'm going to break down the 6 components. So what exactly is the purpose of the 6? So here I'm going to group them into 2 subcategories. So the first one is to physically be delivered oil. So you can do this in 3 ways. As I've stated below, a physical trader can purchase North Sea specific crude oil by either buying dated Brent. Now in this situation, so say we're in June, I can actually go into the market and purchase June cargoes, but these particular cargoes will already have their loading dates assigned. And the reason for this is because they're deemed to be too prompt, or they are spot cargoes. So the crude grade, so which particular BFOET or T grade you're buying will be specified, as will the loading dates. The last 2, through buying EFPs or buying cash BFOET, these have no dates assigned, and the reason for this is because you are purchasing further in advance. So again, we're in the month of June. The earliest EFP or cash BFOET I can go into the market and purchase now will be August. And as stated here, I will be buying any cargo over any date in August, which I will find out at some point in the future. The second subcategory are financially settled contracts such as Brent Futures, CFDs and DFLs. So these, although have some link to the physical market, they are not directly linked to taking delivery of these barrels. So here, the relationship between Brent Futures and BFOET. So this differential in prices is known as an EFP, or in longhand, exchanging your futures for physical. So again, we're in the month of June. I can go and buy August Brent Futures, or I can buy August BFOET if I wish. Now, throughout June, there will be some pricing differential between these two contracts, which usually varies from, I would say, around plus 8 cents BFOET to around 15 cents. Now, as we approach expiry of this August Brent future, we expect, or we definitely do see, the relationship between the two individual components, converging, i.e. the EFP goes to 0. So now the major difference between the two components is that Brent futures are financial contracts, whereas cash BFOET are physically traded oil barrels. So now you can imagine the difference in the two also means that the two are definitely traded in different ways and different manners. So Brent futures tend to be very liquid. There are large volumes trading throughout the month until we get to expiry, whereas the cash BFOET is really only traded by a handful of North Sea physical traders, and it tends to trade on the final day of the month. So the next relationship is the relationship between dated Brent and Brent futures, also known as a DFL in the market. So I've written here, there are two major things that identify a dated Brent contract to a Brent futures contract. Now, firstly, it's the difference in whereabouts on the curve they trade. So dated Brent, you can right now, for example, go into the market and trade dated Brent for today. And this can extend all the way into Cal 23, 24, wherever the liquidity will allow for. Whereas a Brent futures, the earliest you can trade is 2 months deferred. So as I've mentioned again, right now in the trading month of June, the earliest Brent future you can purchase is August Brent futures. Now, secondly, dated Brent is a representation of the physical crude delivery market. Now, I say this because, as I mentioned earlier in the slide, you can purchase dated cargoes, i.e. cargoes with dates attached, using the mechanism that's defined by the exchange, whereas Brent futures are for financial settlement only. So on the date that the Brent futures, so right now August expires, which is on the 30th of June, you will have some cash adjustment in your trading accounts. There will be no physical delivery. The final relationship is the relationship between dated Brent and BFOET. So once we reach expiry of the prompt Brent future, so in this case it's the August Brent future, and that will be on the 30th of June. Those that are holding EFPs or the cash will be nominated a specific grade of those 5 BFOET grades of North Sea oil. And secondly, the physical trader will be told when in the month of August they will be delivered that particular barrel. So once these two things have occurred, their physical oil will become dated, i.e. it now has dates attached to it of the 5 BFOET grades, and so it's no longer not assigned. So the difference between these two, the dated Brent and BFOET, in the market is known as a CFD. Now that just about concludes the presentation that I had prepared, but I hope this makes it obvious that when the market looks to trade Brent futures, yes, of course, it can be a great representation of trading global crude oil prices. But in reality, the oil that prices, such a large amount of crude oil in the world that is traded is actually only 5 fields. It's a very small proportion of oil that's produced every day. And because of that, you can get large discrepancies between what speculators think or how speculators think the market should be performing versus where these 5 particular fields actually do end up pricing. So as I said, that concludes it, but if you have any comments, please do comment below or send me a message and I'll be happy to get back to you. Thank you very much.